So excuse me. Aaron, so when a client comes to with some significant stagnation, so how do you determine if it is like a physical limit or a recovery programming error here? So how do you start programming your training sessions from here?
So the HYROX makes it quite easy for us to look at previous results and see where they're at. So I use high results mostly. It's quite easy to use. So I go back and look at and see what the spread is of their stations and their runs. So if the stations and the runs all look pretty steady, well, there's easy to find a glaring weakness if one of the stations is from experience and look at them, it doesn't line up with the rest of them for that time. So high results actually percentiles them for where they are in their age groups as well. And then I look at the drop off in their run-in. So runs 1 and 2 are usually a little bit faster, and then after that, ignoring run 8 because it includes the rock zone most of the time. So runs 3 to 7, if they're pretty even, and the stations are pretty good, we're looking at probably, we're going to, they've raced well, so we can start looking at how their training is then, and where we can start to build from that. So I just looking back at their previous training, the split of their how they train, then the makeup of their week. So whether they're following a hard, easy protocol that I'd like to see, so that they're not burnt out or they're not overdoing it. Potentially they've just been hammering it and peaking for too long, so they've been hitting too much intensity, and the body's basically just topped out of where they're at. So do we need to approach it from another avenue? Do they need to start putting more volume to build up more reps so that they can start pushing through that plateau? Everyone's slightly different, and it depends on how much training time they've got. So some people may be maxed out with where they are, so you have to start thinking about things and trying to do them smarter. But usually plateaus can be broke through with a change in the type of intensity, depending on the person, or an increase in volume. And I'd normally would like to go with an increase in volume first, but easy volume, and making sure that intensity is followed by true proper recovery to make sure that they're progressing over the long term. Like, we don't want it to be 6 to 8 weeks where you change up the training status and you hammer them with loads of stuff and it looks like they're making lots of progress. That isn't long term. That's not sustainable long term. You need to be able to build it up over years. And I know that the age we live in, everything wants instant gratification and a post on social media to say that you've gone from this to that. But it's not sustainable. If you want true endurance gains, you need to plug into the method and just go after it. Fall in love with the grind and the process of just getting better incrementally and chipping away. And just the good thing with HYROX is there are 9 different ways to get better. So you can put your time into one, make small gains in that, and then move to another whilst maintaining the other one. And that's probably the best way to do it, is to pick an area. What I like to do now is just pick an area, always focusing on running because it's such a massive part of it. So all that aerobic capacity, and especially running, is the mainstay of what most people's program should be. But then out of those 8 stations, you can pick an area, or what station or 2, to focus your time on to try and improve whilst maintaining the rest of them. That way you can get enough reps in on that area in order to improve. So that's a long way about saying, basically, look at the program. Everyone's slightly different, but volume first, intensity after.
Of course. But like you said, and HYROX, as we all know, is a heavily lactate threshold tolerance discipline. But how would you teach your athletes to feel that difference between the sustainable race pace and that inevitable red line that we have to cross in the threshold zone? So how would you teach them to stay calm here and not blow up so easily?
Training fast. So, but it always needs to be done in not in isolation. So, as I like to use heart rate in training, but with a strap so that we can get it accurate. Like using paces as a guide, so we kind of know where a threshold is, but those change with everything. So fatigue, dehydration, temperature, humidity, they all kind of change where the pace is going to be at and where the heart rate is going to be at. And then RPE is the true, gold standard, if you ask me, because
Yeah.
you need to learn how your body feels in certain situations, and that's why having a decent amount of training experience, racing experience helps as well. So going out there racing and knowing when you can push and when not to push, and that feels completely different to how it does in training sometimes. But with threshold, uh, it needs to be that RPE 7 or 8. You need to ask yourself, truly, can I maintain this kind of effort for an hour? Or, if it's not taking you longer than an hour, you're probably racing sub thresholds. So you need to be even more disciplined with what you're doing. So you need to be able to say, if you can't talk a sentence, and you're really trying to struggle to breathe, and you're breathing really hard, it's going to happen at parts in a race and in training, but you need to get that under control and be disciplined enough to know that you need to slow down in order to maintain what you're doing, because the hardest parts of the race are obviously to come. And if you're already huffing and puffing early on, and the same in a session. So I talked about it earlier this week with people, that you need the first half of a session needs to feel totally in control. Even on a threshold run, you shouldn't be really like heart rate straight into those zones. You need to feel like the effort is controlled, and comfortably uncomfortable is the way that you should be able to explain a top end threshold. But you really don't want to be feeling that until the back end of the race. The second half for sure. The first half almost wants to feel like you're floating through it, and that way you're getting it right. You're just on that line of going over. When you start to feel that horrible burn in your legs and your lungs start to burn, and you've already gone over it. And there are points in the race where you are going to dip into that red zone, but you need to learn to come back down from there, and you need to do it quickly, because if you don't, then you're paying bills that you don't have the money for later on. So there's a tax you don't want to pay. You need to chill out and be discipline is so important at this, and leaving your ego aside. So in training, you need to learn what that line is, and that's what you can push it sometimes. But I would always rather everyone was just underneath the line, so that they can learn that discipline. But a lot of people just want to push and feel like they need to be exhausted, and that's not what threshold is. You should be jumping off the treadmill after threshold session thinking, yeah, I could probably do another 10 or 15 minutes of work, not sat on the floor gasping for air.
Yeah. And as you said, that those transitions can vary from race to race. But how can you specifically, how do you train your mind shift from that high output stations back into the steady state run? So how do you train yourself? How do you prepare yourself? Because you're at a high ranking athlete here. Can you break it down for our audience here?
I give myself like a minute, or depending on the size of laps, if it's like I maybe 3/4 to the first lap. It depends on doubles and singles are slightly different, but on a single race, I give myself like a minute and a half after the station, knowing that my breathing rate, because of the blood shunting and because I'm going back into running, is going to be higher.
Yeah.
But I know that I need to control that, and maybe the first lap for me after the station is a little bit slower than the next lap will be, because I will be way more compromised. Whereas I can recover quick enough because my aerobic engine and capacity is big enough that after about a minute, I'm back into my rhythm. So my goal coming off the station is rhythm, and just get back into that rhythm, get your breathing back under control, because I know it's going to be labored, it's going to be slightly high, but I know that's not sustainable. And I tell other people they need to just give themselves that bit of grace, that they're going to feel on edge for a good 30 to 60 seconds, but you need to get it back under control if you want to put high output out again on the next station. If you watch the elites race and you watch them running, none of them are mouth open, like gasping for air. They're in control, they're relaxed, and that's how they get there. They're just way faster at running than us and compromise running, so that they can get in and put more output on the station. So you shouldn't be gasping for air the whole run, struggling, holding on, getting into the station, because you'll leak time on the station. And you go in 5 to 10 seconds slower on a 1 kilometer run could bring you low enough under threshold that you're not in an anaerobic zone, and that you can put out more output on the station. 10 seconds on a run faster could mean a good 45 seconds to 60 seconds on a station lost, because you get to stop and rest and that time just starts to eke away from you. And especially at the end of the race, like warboards are the best example of it. If you go too hard on the runs during the race and you burn all of your glycogen and all your energy's gone, and you're super fatigued, and your legs are hanging out, 100 warballs is a big task because it's the amount of blood shunting and the amount of different muscles used need a lot of energy. And if you've burned it all just by going 5 to 10 seconds quicker on each run, you can lose minutes and minutes and that's not an exaggeration on the warballs. You can see people that are potentially on for really fast times and they're there for 7, 8, 10 minutes because they're busted and it's a technical skill as well. So if you're deprived of oxygen, you're really fatigued, and you're trying to do, it's still a low skill movement, but it's a skill pattern in a really fatigued state. Most people could probably go out and do 100 warballs without too much like hassle. They're not easy, but they could probably do it. But when you stick it at the end of the race, when you're fatigued, if you've overcooked it, they turn in from a difficult exercise into an extremely hard exercise that it's so easy to put the ball down and 10 seconds turns into 30 to 40 seconds rest. And then you're so fatigued, you pick the ball up and you're doing 3 or 4 reps. I know I've been there in the early days, and it's a real horrible place to be.
I loved it. I love the way how you put it, and actually that leads to my next question. So, um, is there anything that you believe that outside that specific metric, outside the running splits, that you believe it's maybe the biggest predictor of under 60 minutes of that HYROX performance? Is there any that you really believe, or just like you said, just the flow, fighting the pace?
Discipline and pace are big. Like
Yeah.
if you're lucky enough to have really good genetics and you're born with a really high VO2 max, you're going to be able to do it a lot easier than somebody else. You're probably not going to have to commit as much time into training. But if you sub 60 in a pro time is going some for a normal person. You have to get everything lined up, and you have to be a good runner, and you have to be able to put out on the stations. People think that they see people doing it and they're coming from another sport and they'll get it straight away. And a lot of people get humbled thinking that they're going to come in and do sub 60 on their first go because they're a really good endurance athlete. But if this is a specific sport, you need to train specifically for it, and you need to get some race experience. The opens, you can wing a little bit more because the stations aren't as taxing, but they still need to be respected. I think the pro, for somebody that's under 6 foot and probably under 85 kilos, is going to have a lot more impact than the open is. I think body composition makes a difference more in the pro probably than it does in the open. But it's just being disciplined. Once you've got to the level, if you are genuinely fit enough to break 60 because the training's done, the ego is the thing that's going to stop you doing it and not being disciplined. So, and it's very easy because it's a highly pumped up environment where you stood in that start tunnel, you've trained for 3-4 months, and everyone goes off like 1,000 gazelles, and you get caught up in the moment, and by the sled pull, you've burnt too many matches and you've done. So discipline and ego need to be on point to break it if you're genuinely fit enough. And then there's probably a massive amount of people out there that are racing HYROX that are physically capable of running sub 60 if they paced it better, but they don't because either race experience, ego, or lack of discipline get in the way, or all of them.
Are there any CrossFit athletes doing the HYROX right now? And what is your opinion about them?
Yeah.
Are they predominantly, for example, maybe like in the top 5%, or are they crashing here with the results? So what is your opinion about them?
It's hard to say. Like theirs is a different type of sport, which doesn't have as much endurance in it. Or, most of their workouts are topping out at 20 minutes. So unless and some of them are just really good athletes that are going to cross over. I imagine they're probably more suited to like a doubles where they get a bit more rest, but in a solo race, they need to have you need to have a running focus. So you can get to a certain level, but unless you're going to commit to doing the running, you aren't going to get to your full potential. and they have too many aspects that they train in CrossFit to be good at, plus being good at a running to that kind of level. So I think they can be competitive, but to be truly competitive and like at elite level, they have to leave that CrossFit bit behind and train specifically for HYROX. Like just even looking at Tia, she's a different type of CrossFit athlete. Like she's
Hmm.
obviously the best that they've ever had.
Yeah.
She still increased her running a good bit when she was already quite a high level endurance CrossFit athlete. So they need to train specifically, whereas CrossFit is unspecific, unknown, and it's very different. So the people need to realize that if you want to get better at something, you need to train specifically for it. There's a point where fitness will get you back, like to a certain level, but after that, you need to specifically train for it. And they do have the benefit of having a really good strength background and power, bringing it in, and then it's just a matter of putting in the running, which because it's split up and it's 8 by a kilometer, it's not the same as if you were running a marathon. I think
Yeah.
there's a certain, like it's in that range where you can get away with not being perfectly economical in the running. Whereas in a marathon, any economy you're losing, you're eking time out on the back end. So there's their strength allows them to be less than economical in the running, probably.
For sure, but how do you program here that interference effect? For example, you have a cross tour athlete here, or just a client who comes with you, and he wants to build up the muscle without, with maintaining that high aerobic volume, without sacrificing one or the other. So how do you structure here your program around that athlete just to, keep an eye on the ball and also do very good with the HYROX?
So it's definitely easier to maintain than it is to build. So
Yeah.
if you are wanting aesthetically to hold that muscle or that strength, you can probably maintain your strength levels with a quarter to a third of the volume we were doing before. So a couple of working sets throughout the week. But I always like to schedule or plan my stuff so that you concentrate on the running first. So in the morning you would do a threshold session so that your running is your quality running is quality. It's not compromised, so that you can push that, so that you can work on your mechanics and your threshold and build that up. And then in the afternoon, we would generally do some kind of strength endurance into specific type conditioning piece for HYROX. And I suppose you then just blend how much of what you want into that afternoon session post running if there's the time. If not, we spread it out throughout the week for what they want to achieve. So everyone's slightly different. Some people are obviously much better lower body than upper body and vice versa. So you just need to find out what their weaknesses are and attack those. But if you want, once again, you need to pick movements that are similar or in par and going to improve HYROX stations, because they're the ones that are going to make the improvements. So you can earlier on in the season, you can probably get away with a bit more general, preparedness, CrossFit style stuff, but you need to get specific after that. So I normally pick 1 to 2 compound exercises and have 1 to 2 working sets probably. So throughout the week, it's 3 to 4. So compound exercises as like the first 15 to 20 minutes of their session. Then
Yeah.
after that, we're going strength endurance then and specific station work. So you work on that one station and you build up the things that are going to make you better at that station, and then just work from there. It's hard you can't be all things to all men at all times. So you need to just pick your specific area you want to work on it and do that. And you at points you're gonna have to sacrifice bits and pieces if your overall goal is to get better at HYROX. You can't be like, even in CrossFit, that there are areas that people are going to have weaknesses in, and that's fine. That's why their competitions are, over a few days, and they have lots of different elements in to work out. Not them, it's almost like working out an average. So if you're good but not great at everything and don't have any weaknesses, like Justin Medeiros, he won a couple of times because he is good across so many elements, but not, the best at any. Well, he is very good on his hands, above his, upside down and stuff. But he doesn't have any massive weaknesses. But he has a lot of good elements where he's really good, but not winning all the events.
Mhm. And for example, if you also have across tour an athlete from a different discipline coming to you, would you consider that the HYROX physical fitness testing is actually a good indicator of a race success, or you will probably under measure some other fitness testing here just to prepare it for the things that is coming?
Yeah, so like I don't really hold much weight in it. Like it's handy
Hmm.
and it's fun, and
Hmm.
sometimes we put it in as just a little bit of a challenge. But 1 kilometer running, and then the rest of it is very, it's way above threshold.
Yeah.
If you're gonna hit it hard, like the fastest time is something like 14 minutes, right? I don't really think that's gonna cross over. And the brackets they've got of 25 minutes or whatever, and under that you go pro, don't really come into it because you don't use any loading in it, so it doesn't make any. It's a 6 kilo wall ball. Everything else is body weight. So I don't really give it any credence towards how I would program anything. I'll use a battery of tests that uh, just give me an idea of where people are at, and gives us sets us baselines of what we're going to work out of. Like so, I use a 5K test, like running test, because it's easy, and most people don't need that much experience to be able to run it. So, and then 2Ks on the ergs. We do a 20-minute FTP on the bike, and then strength testing, and that's basically it. And then if they've ran a race before, we look at that, or races before, and I analyze that, and that's where I work out where to work from. If not, I will try and just give some smaller tests. So just testing the station like a one-off. How fast can you do 80 meters of burpee broad jumps? And if fresh, it's taking them 6 minutes or whatever, then we know that's going to be an area that's going to need work on. That gives us a pretty broad view of what we need, as
Well,
opposed to a selection of random exercises.
how often would you test or retest your athlete, considering that you have, for example, enough time to prepare it, like in a 6 month period before the competition? How often would you test or retest your athlete just to make sure that everything is going well?
Probably like 8 to 12 weeks, but I don't like to
Hmm.
overtest uh, 5K running. I would
Yeah,
look at how they're performing, or want to look at how they're performing in their thresholds. If they're telling
yeah.
me, oh yeah, that this threshold was a good 7 to 8 out of 10, and my heart rate's here, which most of them do, then I think we're there or thereabouts. I don't. It doesn't need to be perfect because it's going to change from day to day anyway, and how they're feeling. So, but if someone says to me, oh, I've done it quite a few times recently before Christmas. There, I feel like I am flying. These times feel too easy. I need to retest my bike, or I need to retest my 5K. Then we'll do it ad hoc, dynamically on the go. Right, well, let's have a look at your program for the next week. We've got a deload week. Let's slip it in there, and see where you're at. And then if it comes back better, great. If it doesn't, it's okay. We'll maybe take a couple of seconds off your threshold anyway and see how it works, and see where your heart rate's at on that, because we don't really train 5K. If it is a weird distance. If it comes in that it's better, then it's better. If it's not better, it's not the end of the world. It's not
Mhm.
what that's not the goal of what we're doing. We're trying to get better at HYROX. So um, the tests are in there, but and then the same with test strength stuff. We usually stick with the same exercises, compound exercises, for about 8 weeks anyway before a change. So they'll be tested at the beginning of that 8 weeks, and then they'll test a different compound exercise at the start of the next 8 week block anyway. So it's not that's fine, because once again, it's not the real priority. It's more maintenance strength, unless we're out of season or whatever, or they haven't got a race for a long time and we can work on a bit more if they've got a big strength deficit. But like, in my opinion, is this maximal strength isn't as important in this as strength and endurance at all. So we focus on that, because someone could be able to squat 200 kilos, but their engine's not, and their muscle fiber type means they're burnt out at 20 reps with 50% of that, which isn't what you want, because we need to put repetitive output of and on the stations and the running. So even if you just think about how many steps you're going to take on a sled push, which is the pro sled push is the heaviest thing we're going to attack. So if you're doing maybe 100 steps, so 50 steps per leg at 200 kilos, it's not the same as a maximum output thing. You need to be able to repeat that over time.
All right. And is it for you the sledge push here like a pure matter of that raw horsepower, like a weight room string, or is it also like a technical leverage here? So how do you coach also your athletes to transfer that force on the ground?
So we having a plan of how to attack it on race day and then training that. So most people can push the sled. Like it's very rare that someone like goes into the gym, and especially with the new center sleds, they move easier than the older sleds. I haven't met anybody yet that has picked their category of open or pro and not been able to move the sled at all. Sometimes it doesn't move very far, but that's because they've run out. They've pushed into the red zone probably, or they've attacked it too hard. So you need to, with the new carpets, and there are issues with it, but if you pick up the back of the sled, the thicker carpet means that it will dig in and it will slow you down. Whether the carpet's rolling or what, there are those issues with it, but that you need to make sure that the force is horizontal and you're pushing it along the carpet or the turf and not into it. If as soon as you lift it, it digs in, and that it's basic physics. The friction's increased and you're slowing down. So we plan it in training to be specific. So at the minute, I'm giving people a lot of push 4 meters, rest 5 to 10 seconds, push 4 meters, rest 5 to 10 seconds, or push 6 meters, half a length, rest 10 seconds. And that way you start to build up the pattern of that's how you're going to go on race day. That's how I'm going to do it. I'm going to stay disciplined. And then once you start pushing that in with some running as well, so you run into the station, you practice exactly what you're going to do on race day. But we always have the caveat that some sleds are going to be heavier than others. So if you push the sled, you're going to know that it's stickier or there's higher friction than normal. You need to brake earlier, and always brake early, because it's better to lose time early by staying under the red line than it is to push a full length, go into the red zone, and then you can't really come back from that. And you're going to, again, lose more time quicker. And you might get through that sled. It's the knock-on effect it's going to have later on in the race. So always have a plan. Don't lift the sled and push it horizontally. Use physics as your friend.
Well, it's good, but I also heard from that perspective it can be quite challenging, and that most people are fearing from sledge pulling. So what is your maybe secret sauce here, or maybe the cues that you're giving to your athletes for maintaining that heart rate pace while performing that stationary upper body dominant pull for quite some time also here? So how do you balance it?
Yeah. Efficiency and economy again, is it? So we need to practice it a lot. You do need to have a decent level of strength for this, but what you don't want to do is overload yourself. So being a rhythm again with this is nice. So, pull, breathe, and I find that this is quite quad heavy, although it's a lot of upper bracing. So straight arm bracing, lats need to be braced and stuff, and you need to have a bit strong core. It's almost, I can't really compare it to any other exercises, but if I was going to compare it to something, I'd say it's more of a Romanian deadlift, hip hinge, pull and walk. So you want to get timing right with this. As soon as your timing's off, the heavier it gets, the less technique fail or flaws you want. So especially with the pro weight, you need to be getting your timing just right so that you're not wasting energy pulling and walking back at different times. So you need to hip hinge, open up the hinge, use gravity again, start falling backwards, and with that, walk backwards. So it's a timing issue, and it's where you can save a lot of time. But you don't want to be heavily squatting down in a deep compromised position, then standing up and walking back separately. You're going to start stressing yourself, and that's going to push your heart rate up even more. I think it is one of the biggest barriers at the minute, and one of the big hurdles with the new turf as well. I find it to be stickier and a bit slower to move the sled now than it did on the old carpet. So you need to really, you need to spend time pulling that sled and getting. I recommend like filming yourself, watching yourself back. Make sure you're going through the rhythm, but you need to find your rhythm. A lot of people like to hold on to the rope. I don't. I like to drop it and reset. It means I can keep the rope tidy as well in the box. But there's plenty of people who do it, hold on to it. It's just you need to work out what works for you. And different size athletes are obviously going to be taxed in different ways. So the bigger you are, the easier it is because you're going to have the ability to lean back and the sled's going to come with you. Gravity's going to do you a favor. The smaller you are, you're going to have to work on that engine again and that strength endurance just to keep moving it quick so that you can keep going. But 50 meters of sled pull at pro weight is taxing.
Yeah.
You want to make sure that you stay below that red line again because you've got 80 meters of burpees after, and it's a bit of a power exercise. So I think the knock-on effect with a heavy sled pull is probably more than the push, but your pacing into the sled matters more, I think. If you hammer the first 3 runs and you really push the sled because you think it looks nice that you've got a 2-minute time, that will slow that sled pull down and then just knock on. So pacing into that sled is also really important. So keeping below that line on run 3 to make sure that you can go in fresh. And, your heart rate's going to zip up there. And I find that apart from wall ball, sled pull is the one that probably gets my heart rate the highest by the last length. So it really is a control issue. And you want to get it back down as quick as possible on the next run.
Okay, let's go back just to the programming once because I need to be very specific here when it comes to, for example, when you have an athlete also that comes from another sport discipline. So what is maybe your minimum effective dosage of pure strength and conditioning here work that, for example, if you put like you said, a 5K run here to the test, maybe some squats, some deadlifts to make that compatible to elite HYROX athlete, for example, to prepare him during the race, if you have like a 12-week block time to manage, like to be like in that competitive state. So what is that minimum effective dosage here?
So everyone's obviously different. I think everyone reacts different. The same as everything. They react different to strength stuff. So for me, like especially for upper body, I think you need to be hit that probably a little bit more than lower body to maintain it. So because of all the other stuff you do as well, I think the sled pushing and pulling, that obviously maintains lower body strength and stuff. But things like shoulders and chest, I think you need to be. I like to hit shoulder press has got to be in there at least once a week. So for me not to start to drop off. So it's something I need to be on top of. But it's a really hard question to answer generically for everybody. So I would still I'd like 2 strength sessions a week, but not with a couple of compound exercises. And I think that's enough to maintain what they've built. If they're really struggling with some of the output stuff then I'm probably still going to do it specifically on that station. So more heavy sled push and sled pull as opposed to a deadlift or a trap bar deadlift or a squat. But I still put them in because they have a place in developing. For like a big compound exercise is going to hit so many different things. We're going to do it without doing too much of the station. So, but it only needs to be 3 to 5 reps, 2 working sets probably. But I change it throughout the year, and it depends. So it is difficult to answer because everyone's different. But you need less than you think you need.
Let me rephrase it. For example, let's narrow it down. For example, for how long would your program include a picking phase? To that kind of athlete, just for him to reach the maximum results here. If we see, for example, like an average one, we also know what's like the minimum basic requirements for example, like a rugby player or like a football player, for him just to narrow it down to a specific HYROX competition here.
So I like to keep it like, so we're specifically hitting stuff throughout the year.
Mm-hmm.
So for a true A race, like peaking, I
Mm-hmm.
think 5 to 6 weeks is long enough.
5 to 6. Okay.
So we'll dial in that 5 to 6 weeks. I dial back the strength to probably only one session a week, and then you're going to be hitting HYROX specific stuff 2 to 3 times a week. So that strength day will probably be threshold in the morning and then strength in the afternoon, and then the other two hard sessions for the week are going to be really race specific. So you're
Yeah.
going to be hitting race intensity in the runs, maybe a little bit faster, and into the stations. I think if you do too much of that, like I said at the beginning, like all year round, you end up burnt out. But I
Yeah.
think it also gives you like a false sense of security, and you don't get the time on the stations to progress. So you want to be as economical as you can throughout the year through getting as much station work in as you possibly can, as much threshold running as you can. Then, like I said, blend them together. And I think 5 to 6 weeks is probably long enough because you've built up such a good base and you're so economical and efficient at everything that it's just a matter of blending them together without um, overdoing it.
Okay. And maybe is this maybe also your answer to it? My next question. So I wanted to ask you, like, specifically, what is the biggest mistake maybe the athletes or the coaches are making the final 2 week period time before the race that actually separates that 1%, the top 1% of the athletes from the rest of them? Or would you also like to add something more to the things that you just said
So
here? I mean,
I think that it depends on the race. So like
mm-hmm.
I think you can only really peak once or twice a year properly for an A race. So if you're unfortunately like the elite structure now is not great for that. They need to race a lot more and probably not in tip top condition, but they're absolute monsters, so they can repeat it. But I think if you are trying to build up race experience with B races or training races throughout the year,
Yeah.
don't really deload. 2 to 3 days before the race, cut out your last hard session maybe and jog it through so that you're primed a little bit, but you haven't lost any fitness. And then 2 or 3 days after to recover, wait, check your metrics, HRV and resting heart rate and stuff, and see how you feel, and then go back into training. But with an A race, I think let's think world champs now in June. It's 22nd of June or around that time. 5 6 weeks back from that middle of to the beginning to second week of May, you start to really get specific. In those last 2 weeks, like I think 2 weeks is probably too long for a race that only lasts about an hour
Mm-hmm.
to an hour and at the elite level, 50 odd minutes to for the women, an hour, and even at an average, I think the average time for an open race is an hour 30. It's more half marathon type deloading that you need to think about rather than marathon. So in the last week, I think people are paying it. In the last 2 weeks, are probably paying it too much respect and missing out on a bit of training that penultimate week before the race. So the 14 to 7 days, just keep doing what you're normally doing, and then 7 days out, you can start to think of maybe if you're doing a long workout or a long run, you should cut some of the intensity of that 20 or start some of the volume of it, 20 to 30%, reduce throughout that week, and then you can have the last 2 or 3 days and really prime up for it. But I think over tapering is probably a bit of an issue with this because there's so many things you can be concentrating on. You can dial down the volume, keep the intensity there or thereabouts. If it's only threshold anyway, you can probably recover from it quick enough. And then if it's a weekend race, Wednesday you finish off your last bit of intensity, and then Thursday, Friday, just a little bit of prime and stuff, and good to go for the weekends. So for something that's not going to fully deplete your glycogen stores, probably because of the length of it, it's not the same as tapering for a marathon. Where, if you look at top marathon runners, they're running anything from like some are running 150, 200 miles a week, crazy stuff. So
Yeah.
you tapering off that's going to have a different effect to what we're doing. It depends on your volume. Like if you are 16 to 20 hours a week, you don't want to be going down to 5 to 6 hours for that final week. You are going to feel awful. So it's getting the balance right and everyone's slightly different. And some people actually have a pretty negative reaction to tapering because like psychologically they feel like they're losing stuff. So you have to keep them primed up and going. And some people just love volume. And like I would rather just keep cranking volume, especially if it's not an A race. Just go straight in and do the race tired.
But is there any difference in your approach when it comes to a huge age gap? For example, I'm approaching to my fourth decade of my life. For example, how would you adjust your training volume for the athletes over 40 compared to the 20-year-old guys, who are just, in their prime, specifically, for example, regarding maybe like to that eccentric loading, which is also very crucial maybe for the strength and conditioning also in the first phase, or just in general, just to prepare for the HYROX here. So how would you underline
So
this aging gap theory?
it, it depends on their training age as well. So there's a difference
Mm-hmm.
between someone like me who's been training for probably 15 years in endurance sports and then rugby before that. I have a different training age to somebody that's been doing it for 2 or 3 years, which is quite common now because it's exploded and people are all over it. So
Yeah,
what I can apply to myself and people with a similar 10 plus training years in the sport is different to what somebody with 2 or 3 years, maybe even less. So, but in someone in their 20s, I'm going to be able to give them more intensity than somebody that's in their 40s. I know there's some stuff that says that masters can probably deal with a little bit less volume and a little bit more intensity, but I think that's if they've got a big training history. If you don't have a big training history, I think err on the side of caution and reduce your intensity and intersperse with more recovery. So even if this means that you can only do your harder days twice a week, so Monday, it might be, Tuesday and Friday, the days that you can go harder, everything, and maybe a moderate day in there, and everything else is pure recovery or really easy stuff. Whereas I think people in their 20s can bounce back a little bit harder. So you can give them a little bit more of both probably, especially if they've got a good training age. But it's a balance between the amount of volume they're doing and can handle and how much intensity you can put in there. But definitely for older people, I'm 40, so I would go with more easier volume and more sustainability, um, and that rather than more intensity, because I think it's harder for us to recover from, muscle density and stuff starts dropping at when we get over 40 anyway, and it's harder to maintain. So keep on the
for
strength
sure.
stuff, uh, uh, but dial down your intensity so that you can recover quicker.
But if you have an athlete, for example, like I do, we are also like very tight with our schedules here. And if an athlete can only train 4 days a week, so how do you prioritize these big threes like running, strength, stationary work here? How would you, structure a plan here for me, for example, if I'm available 4 times per week here?
It depends on how long you've got within those 4 days. But I like
Mm-hmm.
to use something called like a power hour. So we try and get everything. I would prefer little and often rather than big chunks. So if in those 4 training sessions, probably not all 4 because one of those is going to be back to back because of a 7-day week, or
Mm-hmm.
we extend it to a 14-day cycle, trying to get everything in that hour to hour and a half that you've got training. So whether that means we do 20 to 30 minutes on the front end, a quick 5-minute warm up, whatever, 20 to 30 minutes of some threshold running, and then we do another 20 minutes of station work. And then
No,
the next day might be, again, we hit some threshold or tempo, and then you do some strength into more strength endurance on specific stuff. So it would be blending, trying to get as much little and often as you can so that you can touch everything that you want to work in that block without overdoing it. And then, so you'd probably have 3 of those kind of days where they're basically, you're going to have to go for more intensity because within reason, more threshold type intensity, more strength endurance, and not as much aerobic stuff. And then you're probably going to need to do at least that fourth day is going to need to be a longer aerobic piece. It isn't optimal, but if that's all you've got, it's all you've got to work with. And you probably are going to plateau and need to change it up more regularly than if you had more time to keep building that aerobic engine because you need more volume. So it
for
would
sure.
be it's hard to try and do everything, but I think you work on it again like an 8 week block, and I try and pick in that 8 week block where we can target specific areas and maintain everything else. So where, whether you go in and you've got a high emphasis 2 days a week on lunging maybe and single leg strength, and then you work into a block where you're hitting more sleds and only doing a little bit of the other bits and pieces. It's going to have to be something like that. But you're probably going to have to try and get your threshold running first, followed by some strength and strength endurance for the rest of the session. And it's workable. You just realize that your numbers on the second half of the stage aren't going to be the same as if you were fresh and if you'd had 4 to 6 hours in between to do a second session, maybe. And your aerobic ceiling's only going to go so high with that much volume.
Okay, and if we, for example, let's go back, consider that you're having and preparing a HYROX athletes here. How does your recovery protocols look like? Are you training on a specific days? Or, for example, are you utilizing them as a double training session per day? How do you manage here to load your athletes into just, taking care of without, overtraining them and burning them out here?
So yeah, making hard days hard and easy days very easy. But so I have actually seen a lot of people do stuff where they end up doing like a threshold and hard work, and then the day after doing strength, and then back into more. Like I think people need to be really respectful of the CNS and peripheral nervous system fatigue strength puts in. So I put them on the same day. That way, it means you get a good 48 hours, 72 hours, depending on your structure, before you go again on something slightly harder, because it is fatiguing and you are going to need to recover. I am constantly banging on about how, if we go Monday, Wednesday, Friday, right, and we go, and those are, say Monday would be a threshold run in the morning and then strength and conditioning in the afternoon, HYROX specific. Wednesday's similar, the runs and the structure will be slightly different. Then Friday, or Saturday, whatever day it is, to be a longer, more moderate session. So it's still fatiguing, but like at a lower intensity. So we'll go run station, a couple of different stations, and just build up capacity. That is also, I would class that as a hard day as well, because of the length of it and just because of the impact of the stations and the loading. Tuesdays, Thursdays, Saturdays and Sundays. Saturday might be a long run or a long bike, but it's going to be low intensity. So we're still out there getting stuff done, but it needs to be done low intensity. And then the other days are easy running, and I mean real easy running. For me, that's like zone 1. So yesterday, my easy run average heart rate was 111 beats a minute, like 2 minutes slower than 5K pace. And that's fine, because you're going to still get aerobic adaptations.
Yeah.
But you are going to recover, so that today is a day that I can put out output. And then the rest, whatever you can fit in, however much time you've got to put in easy bike or easy ergs around that. So we go hard. I don't want to call them hard days, I suppose, like harder days and easy days, so that you can build up volume over time. Because if you keep thrashing it all the time, you just aren't going to recover. And like I said earlier, you're going to plateau and either burn out, just get sick of doing it. And you need to be able to enjoy your training as well. So it doesn't have to be a death slog all the time. You can train just under like threshold levels, and you're still going to improve everything. But you're not going to be burnt out, and you're not going to be hating your training. You're not going to be waking up in the morning looking at your program and thinking, "Geez, I don't want to do this today."
Yeah,
you want to be going in there going, "I can. This is going to be, a bit of work, but I get through it, and I know I'll get through it." And then we build from that. So each week just builds up a little bit. So a little bit more volume in the intensity, and then whatever you can fit in the easy stuff around that. I'm like, if people say to me, I want more volume, the first place we're getting volume is zone 1, and on the bike probably, depending on their running history. Like I think there's so much bang for buck sitting on a bike and just working zone 1, and so little risk to it, so that if you've got time, you can do it. The biggest limiter is people's time on how well they're going to perform.
But I wanted to ask you this very personally here. As soon as I actually jump into your page, you also held a British record. So what was going through your mind during that last lap of your race? So how did you manage that dark place? So where the body and mind are in a completely two different places here. Can you walk us through a little bit here, just for us maybe to
Quite.
endure and to grasp that feeling?
So I think if you pace it right anyway, and you're borderline on the edge of your limits. But I'll tell you what makes it really easy in HYROX is the constant changing. So all you have to think about is getting through that next run or that next station and executing that. So I'm always concentrating on living in the in the now, however cheesy it sounds. But don't think about the finish when you're on the sled push. You need to
Yeah.
be thinking about executing then. So being really focused on what you're doing. I don't run to splits, but I execute to a plan, if that makes sense. So I
Hmm.
know on the ARGs kind of where I need to be and how I feel. Everything else is executed in a plan, like in a rhythm. So that's what I'm concentrating on. I'm not thinking, obviously at points I'm thinking this really hurts. You need to just keep moving forward. But you only really need to be in that block for 3 to 4, however long minutes it is for the run or the station. So you just need to hold on long enough that you can sustain it into the next one. So it's just get into the rhythm, keep concentrating on how you're feeling and performing and executing so that you can put one foot in front of the other and keep moving forward. As soon as you start thinking, the finish is coming or the wall balls is coming, then you start to lose concentration and you start to slow down or you start to really hurt or have negative self talk. So just telling yourself that you are well prepared and that I've done the work for it, that I've been there before, that I know this is how it should feel, and that I will get through it. And then the next station's coming. And by the time that's happened, you're at the next station. And then when you're in the war balls, it's just go one more or just keep going, keep
Yeah.
going. Make it to, I'm going to 50, right? I've done 50, we're hitting 60. Come on, now you broke the back of it, another 10, another, and you just you have to lie to yourself. You
Yeah.
have to, right? If you get to 70, you put the ball down. You get to 70, now you haven't put the ball down. Keep going. Why just do 5 more? And then lie again until you get that. But once you get to 80, well, you've done it now. You just as well keep going. And unless you're completely fatigued and your body just stops working, then you can lie to yourself and keep going. And there is always a little bit more in there. And I think sometimes maybe I've ran some decent times, but I think I've left a little bit in the tank as well that I could have gone a little one more or a little bit further. And I think that's in HYROX. I think that's what keeps us coming back so often is because we can look at every area of it and go, you know what? There's more there. There's
Yeah.
more in that little bit. I can eke out a little bit more time here. I can make a little bit more there. What can I do to get me better at that? And then luckily we can, like in Europe, we can race all the time. If you can get all the tickets, you can go and race. So you can go and have a go at that and practice it. But you can practice it in a sim, but it's not the same thing. I think you need to go out there, get the experience, be in the environment, soak it all up, know how it feels, learn how it feels. Everyone's different. Every race I've done has felt slightly different, and doubles to singles completely different. I've been in some that flow state when you've nailed it and you've got everything just right, the race doesn't even feel hard. And you get to the end and you're like, wow, I don't understand how I've run that time. It didn't even feel hard, but it's because you've got it just right. You've trained enough to be able to do that. So that's probably the best feeling you can have. Or there's the other times where you hating the whole thing, and that's all right because you learn something from that as well. So you need to just, as long as you take something away from every race and learn from it, there's never really a failure.
Awesome. I love the way how you put it, the positive self-talk, and actually, but when you're in the singles, you know yourself, you know how to push your limits, but how do you coach an athlete to race, the person next to them when you're in a double without losing the sight of their own pre-planned, how should I say, plan, and to split their targets so with the person next to them. So how do you actually manage that mentality and the pre-game or post-game during the game session?
I think, yeah, that's really tricky because,
Yeah.
like, I don't think it, in even in doubles or solos, you're never really racing somebody else. There are
Hmm.
you are and you're not, but there will only be through. And the worst thing you could probably do is try to race somebody else because it will. Everybody has strengths and weaknesses. So even at the elite level, it looks that they are racing each other, but there's so much back and forth. Like if you try to stay with someone on a weaker station, you're going to blow yourself up and you're going to pay for it later on. So you need to know that if you slow down now and play to your strengths later on. So if you're weaker on the sled push and the person next to you is flying past you, but you are technically racing them, you need to let them go. So that because if you blow yourself up then you've done yourself no favors. So you always need to play to your strengths, and even more so in this. It's a little bit different in running because it's one mono, you know, one thing that you need to concentrate on. This you are gonna have weaknesses. No one is perfect at everything, so you need to realize that, and it is basically a time trial with other people. So if you get locked in to trying to stick with other people and you race those people, you are jeopardizing your race. You need to work out how you can respond to each part of the race. And even in doubles, it is so much higher octane and chaotic. It's still a big pacing battle. I've seen people try to stay with us in the doubles and go above their capacity because they think they get to rest and swapping over, and they're blown out the back door by the end of the burpee ball jumps. It's game over for them. And it's still a long way to go, even if you get to share the workload. So you still need to be honest with you and your partner on how you can put out the most output as a team without blowing one of you up. So there's no good one of you being way better than the other and then still doing 50-50.
Yeah.
You need to balance that so that and every partnership's different. But the biggest thing is have a plan and then communicate as soon as you get out there, because um, it could be got blown out the water by the end of the second station or the third run. If you try and go outside of somebody's capacity, it's no point. So communication is the biggest thing in doubles.
Did you have to go through that situation, for example, when you had, of course, with your partner pre-planned how you should go through the race, and everything go astray? That you have to actually, communicate everything and to go back into the race. Did you had that situation?
So it's very rare that. So I've a couple of different people that I race with, and all of the strategies are different. So how we've done it, but most is a you know I do this part, you do that part. I finish the station so that I can. If you're the better runner, I'll finish the station so that you
Hmm.
get a bit of recovery before we go back into the running. Most of the time, so the person I race with at the minute in the pro doubles, Lee, our station work. He's probably better at the stations than me, and I'm better on the run in. And but we can pretty much split it 50-50. Sometimes I'll pick up a little bit at the end so that he can recover before he gets back onto the run, and he starts the station. But we have a plan that how we split everything. But both of them, I think, the couple of races we've done now, everything's changed just slightly because one of us needs to recover a little bit on something, or we change slightly. So there's always a little bit of dynamic play out there where you go, just take this little bit or take this little extra bit. And if you're not willing, you need to trust each other. So if you don't communicate well and trust each other, it doesn't mean that you can just jack on them and say, "Hey, right, you need to take this part now," because it's not the best thing for the team. So you need to play into each other's strengths, but you need to be honest. And you don't, if you're not on for doing something, you have to say, "I can't do that." There's a couple of times that I've been asked, like, "Can you do more of this sled?" Or "Can you do more of this?" I've just had to say no. You're going to have to pick it up. So there's only so much you can do,
Yeah.
but you have to be honest with each other, and you have to trust each other's strengths.
For sure, but I was very curious in that kind of situation, is scenario where you also, for example, do you possess some kind of pre-race ritual, not just you as an individual, but maybe for your elite athletes, to ensure that they are neurologically primed, but not that emotionally fatigued and exhausted before the race starts? how
So
do you
it's
prepare
really
them
everyone's
just on the day?
yeah,
Sorry.
it's really difficult for everyone's slightly different, so everybody reacts like differently. To me now, I've done that many races, I don't find it a
Hmm.
any kind of psychological strain. It's just I prepare for it as if it's just a normal training session, and that's how I
Hmm.
attack it. But other people get anxious with it, nervous, and it's a matter of just reminding them of the work they've done pre-race. So all of the training, if the training block's gone well, it's easy. But you need to just look back at what you've done over the last couple of months. We've hit everything. You've done well. You've had a nice training block, but then put it into like focus. It's only sport. Like
Yeah.
it's not life or death. So you need to be as relaxed as possible because that's when you'll perform the best. So work on just relaxing. Just execute your plan. So have a plan and execute it step by step and not thinking of the outcome all the time. Just think of the process of how you're going to go through that race and what you're going to do. I try not to get people to race to splits because either you will push when you don't have it or you might leave something out there. So you need to learn to race to feel of so you just need to go in with a plan of how it should feel and how you need to execute. Relax at the start and let everything go. Let the tide go out because it will, and everyone will leave. And just have the confidence to know that you can execute that race, that you've done the work to get to the finish line in whatever time it is or whatever position it is. So it's just calm. Just be calm and just have confidence in what you've done. Don't overthink it because as soon as you start going into what if I do this, what if I don't do that, you start to question it, anxiety builds, and you don't get anywhere. You don't get any benefit out of it. All of the research and science shows that relaxed, calm racing is and not chasing splits is what's best for the athlete, not having a fixed plan and a fixed mindset. You just need to go with the flow, basically. It sounds really hippie, but like that is where the great performances come. And you surprise yourself if you just relax and chill and you're allowed to enjoy it. Like I think one of the big things is now we like there's so much pressure on what we think we should be doing that we don't enjoy what we're doing. So go out there and you can even smile. It's allowed. Like whereas you
Mhm.
don't have to be, looking like you're going to die. You can just chill and enjoy your race. Just have confidence in what you've done and execute what you've planned.
So that recipe followed you also. I mean, it's a kind of, for example, very contradictory because probably the people put a lot of pressure on themselves, considering that you held the British record, that you were a champion here. So normally those people put a little bit more pressure on themselves because they want to achieve something. So how do you handle, my question to you, how do you handle the bad race result here? So what is the first thing you look at it? Is it like the data? How do you diagnose what went wrong here?
So it's got to be how you felt first, because like
Hmm.
you might have had a bad race because you're not feeling great. It just didn't go very well. Allow people 24, 48 hours to feel sorry for themselves before we do anything.
Yeah.
Like get it out your system, right? You've put in all this training. You wanted a good outcome. You didn't get what you thought you were going to get. That's okay. It happens, and
Yeah.
we need to learn from that. But you're allowed 24, 48, and really a day or so. Like if you race on Saturday, by Monday morning, I don't want to hear any more whinging about how bad you did in the race. It's done. We can't undo what happened. We can only learn from it. So the race wasn't great. So what? It's not. It's not the end of the world. It doesn't mean that all of the training you did was a waste of time. You just didn't put the cherry on top of the cake. Let's find out why. Did you go out too hot? Did we miss something in training? Which is probably more like it's just some races are just don't go how you expect them to go. Like even when you do a training session, not every training session is perfect, so not every race is going to be perfect. But because it's so far and few between, like I think the more you race, the easier it gets to accept a bad result. So if you only race 2 or 3 times a year, you've invested a lot of time to get to that start line. You end up with more pressure on yourself, and then
Yeah.
the result it, it's a bit more disheartening. But you need to understand, like, enjoy the process of getting to the start line first, and not make the whole race the evaluation of everything you've done because you've done great things to get there. So process it and mourn the defeat or whatever it is, but you need to move on from that. And the research shows that the top athletes and elite performers are the ones that are able to let go of past performances or past um, results or whatever it is. And I think in tennis that the highest performers were the ones that forget the shot where they had failed
Yeah.
and concentrate on just where they were at the minute. So I think if you can just keep knocking more training back off after that and get back into your rhythm, I think is the best thing for it. But you get a bit of mourning because you've put a lot of a time and effort into the race. But you go and analyze what you've done. So if there's a massive spread of the runs and you've fallen off and died, is it because you paced it badly, or were we missing some endurance capacity there? Do we need to add in more stuff? Did you fall apart on one specific station and that knocked on? There are things that are outside of your control as well. Like you go in there and it could be a really hot and humid day. I know we race in convention centers, but some of them the aircon doesn't really work very well. You need to be realistic with we need to take responsibility for the result, because if it was really hot and you went out so hard, it's still technically your fault. But if you blew up, but if you went slower because it was hot and humid and you raced to your potential for that day, the time doesn't matter because that's what it is. Then we can start looking at position in the race. There's so many elements that you can look at to change or to review. And there's another part of the HYROX conundrum in it, so that you can basically, there's so much information that you can work from to build your next step forward. So I think learn from the biggest thing is, as long as you learn something from that race, it's never truly a fail. If you don't, then you did fail. But there is always something to learn, because there's so much data out there, and just how you performed and how you feel. So I think being realistic with your expectations is a big thing. Like, not expecting to go from 70 minutes to 60 minutes in 6 months is not a realistic expectation for the majority of people. So having incremental steps means that the chance of failure is far lower. So it's again that ego and discipline thing. Drop your ego and don't do it for a social media post. Do it because you want to get better as a person and as an athlete.
Like in life, I think there is a directly correlation with the life itself. So I love the way how you put it. And when it comes to the future of the sport itself, we know that the HYROX is evolving very fast, gaining the popularity on every corner on this planet. So maybe from your perspective, what is one piece of the equipment or movement do you think that, or even should be added or just be removed from that circuit in the future? Is there anything that you would change around the sport or not?
So I think no. Like, if you change something, it becomes a different sport. And like HYROX is HYROX. If you want to make it there are plenty of different hybrid sports out there. So the hybrid games, Deadly Dozen, that Striker. There are different sports out there, or different hybrid races. I think HYROX needs to stay as it is. It just needs to be managed better. I think we get a lot of slack for movement standards, because but we're in a mass participation sport with 9 different elements that are hard to manage all of them. When the majority of the volunteers most of the judges are volunteers. So if you're not paying people, their commitment to it's not that high. And it's hard to, and people out there moaning about the standard of judging aren't volunteering to go and judge. So I think there needs that they are constantly trying to improve, and they get a lot of slack, but it's technically still a really new sport. First race 2017, but didn't really take off to 21, 22 really post-COVID, and then it exploded in the UK. So they've started to put in things, and they constantly update the rules, and I think that's what they're doing well. I still don't think it's there. Like, the war ball targets now are sensorized. They're still going to have to do something more with that, and I believe they are doing some stuff with AI and other video and capability to look at the standards. And Barbie broad jumps are always going to get hammered because it's just a movement you probably haven't seen anywhere else, and it's hard to judge. So what they do with that, I don't know, but they do need to do better with that. So I wouldn't change anything other than the ability for them to deliver a standardized race across the board.
But that means if they raise the standard of the racing, that means that the sport should turn professional here. Like you said, they need to pay the people, they need to look all of these standards, how the referee should look up the situations. But do you think also on the other side, we will see specialist coaches here? Maybe some running coaches versus some strength coaches that we all know now, or the hybrid coach. I don't know how you call it, but do you see also the involvement as the industry progresses here, or we're just gonna call ourselves strength and conditioning coaches like all over the place?
Yeah, I think so. Like it's there will probably be specialist coaches, and like there are hundreds, there's thousands of running
Yeah,
coaches out there.
yeah,
There's way too many HYROX coaches at the minute. People that have done a couple of HYROX and then teaching people to do HYROX, probably without the right experience or qualification. But the day and age we live in means we can't really do a lot about that. I think at the elite level, just like heptathlon and decathlon, they'll probably have head coaches with drop downs and specializations. It's low skill, it's not the same type of thing. So one coach can do all of this, I think. But why wouldn't you employ specialists in certain movements to do certain things? I don't do my own accounts. I don't cut my own hair. I've got somebody else to do that.
yeah.
So like, but so if you aren't proficient in an area, you should ask somebody else to do it. Like if they're a professional. I don't know. I don't think there's ever going to be a professional Barpy broad jump coach out there. I think it's probably too niche and not qualification. So there will be, I think, HYROX specific coaches, but I think at the elite level, they're likely to have enough time and to be able to break it down and have coaches in different areas. So maybe a running coach and a strength conditioning coach, but a HYROX coach to do all their planning. So I imagine that's probably the same as like a sports team, that they could do that. But I think it's still low enough skill that you can get away with a generalized HYROX coach on the majority. But if there's a specific area that really needs worked on, people are going to niche it. Like, and it's a marketable area, isn't it?
But also maybe one key component here that I'm also very curious about is maybe a footwear. Is a footwear also very crucial here when it comes to, like you said, there is also on one side we have running periods, but then just the next station could be sledge pushing. So you have to push like 152 kilos of the sledge. So how important is a good footwear here? That can be also a game changer.
So I think, yeah, there's it's probably the biggest question that everybody asks. So, like it's there's areas for improvement. Like where trainers have come from pre-2017 when Nike launched the first Vaporfly to where they are now is crazy, and they definitely make improvements. And because the race is so run heavy, you want a shoe that makes you as economical as possible in running without any extra cost apart from to the wallet. But it needs to have good grip, and it needs to have good stability. And I think they are now making specific bespoke shoes. So next month, the Puma DV8 Elite 4 comes out, and they're calling that the first proper HYROX specific shoe. And it was always going to be them because they're partnered with HYROX. So decent stability with a carbon plate and the foam and good grip. So we'll see how that goes. The elites are saying it, that have raced in it already, and Melbourne are saying it's wicked. I don't know. I think it gets more limelight than it probably needs to. A good, sturdy, comfortable shoe, it's going to do you pretty well. If you can get one that you can operate well with a carbon plate on, that's going to make you as economical as possible, sweet. If it's got rubbish grip, the sleds are going to be harder. But it's a balancing act, and there will be more niche shoes coming out that are bespoke for HYROX, I imagine, because the market's just growing.
Okay, I will definitely going to have that in mind also with the carbon foot. But before we wrap this up, this amazing conversation, and I want to thank you once again for taking the time. If you could give yourself, your younger self, just one piece of the advice starting this fitness journey, what would it be when it comes to that long game coaching? So what would it be?
Yeah, patience. Like
Patience.
don't rush it. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. Like I think if I could go back um, to when I first started running, I would have probably done next to no intensity for the first year to
Mm-hmm.
18 months. If I knew I was still going to be doing it now, I would have just built up easy volume and conditioned my body. I didn't, and I learned a lot in the first year, 2 years of just pushing too much too quickly and not being patient. And I probably would have ran faster earlier if I'd just been patient and built it up slowly.
Yeah.
But then what do you learn from that? I learned a lot that that's not the way to do it, and that these things take time. So be patient because it will come. There are no overnight fixes. You'll probably, in the first year or so, you'll get really good. Even 2 years, you'll get really good gains, and then it slows down, and then you need to realize that this is a roller coaster. You'll plateau for a long time, and all of a sudden you'll wake up one morning and you would have took another step up. So be patient. Wait for those step ups. They will come. You just have to keep doing the boring things over and over, and you have to learn to enjoy them. So be patient, keep chipping away. The results will come, and don't rush it.
Wonderful. And before we wrap this up, where the people can find you and follow your amazing work here. So I'm just gonna give you a little bit time and space to share that.
So like most of my stuff is pushed out on Instagram. It's the platform I use mostly now. So WDM coach _ coaching on Instagram, and then there's a little bit on TikTok, but it's almost the same thing. So,
Yeah.
and then people can, there's a link to my website, and everything I offer is on my Instagram bio. That's the easiest way to do it. My DMs are open, so if people want to ask me questions or fire stuff across, and I'm happy to discuss it. I'm a self-certified nerd in this stuff, and having conversations interests me. So I'm happy to do it. So yeah, I hope if anybody wants to fire stuff across, hit it across, and I'll help out wherever I can. And then if it moves on to the coaching stuff, I offer a couple of different things. So one to one of it at the minute, I'm oversubscribed. So I run a group training program or two, performance and podium. Performance is more of um, uh, a little bit lower volume, but covers everything throughout the week, like 6 to 7 hours of training a week. And then the podium one is the one that's a lot higher subscribed to, but it's a good lot of volumes, or two training sessions most days, and then long stuff on the weekend. But there's different options in there for you to try to attack different areas of HYROX, like I said earlier, giving you streams where you can concentrate on one area and then maintain everything else. And it includes a 5 6 week peaking program for your A race. So it's a group based thing. So the days are set, but you can move them around how you want. But it has personal metrics in there. So it takes all those tests that we talked about earlier. And I've worked out a percentage of those to make sure that people stay in the right intensity, to ensure that the volume and the intensity are sustainable and manageable, so that people make good long-term success. And I think last year in 2025, that those two programs and the one-to-one stuff got over 100 podiums, well over 100 podiums across the year. So it's pretty
Wow.
good return rate on what people are doing.
Amazing. So I can only say to this, so ladies and gentlemen, this was Aaron Woodman, a man who definitely proves that success in HYROX isn't just about doing more, it's about doing the right things with unrelenting consistency, as he said here today. And please, if you want to follow his journey or dive deeper into the training philosophy that he has, please make sure to check out his work at WDM Coaching. So please, thank you for listening. Please keep training with intent, as Aaron said here today, and we will see you in the next episode. Please, take a good care and bye bye. Thank you, Aaron.
Thanks.